Are you? So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'll begin the meeting today with the territorial acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, land on which we are broadcasting from, today is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous peoples with whom we share this land today. So just a couple of items for a moment of reflection. This is the first time council's met since the Transgender Day of Remembrance, which was on November 20th. So I'm just taking the opportunity to recognize that day today on behalf of council. So today we pause to reflect on the ongoing harmful impacts of gender-based violence in our own community and around the world. We especially remember trans people all over the world whose lives have been lost due to anti-trans violence. November 20th was Transgender Day of Remembrance, a day of mourning and solidarity with trans people in our community whose lives are deeply affected by widespread violence. The recent Club Q murders in Colorado were a stark reminder of deadly violence affecting far too many in the LGBTQ+ communities. The 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, observed worldwide from November 25th to December 10th, is time dedicated to changing this reality. Violence happens on a continuum, therefore our responses must reflect this, and we can all take action. As a council and as a community, we must respect the right for self-determination. Upholding welcoming workspaces and community spaces where we use people's preferred pronouns and support people in using any washroom of their choice are two simple ways we can actualize support. We must commit to including trans women, trans men, non-binary, two-spirit people, gender fluid, gender non-conforming, and gender diverse folks in conversations about women's rights, feminism, and gender equality. Ideologies that refuse to recognize trans women are harmful and further oppress trans and gender diverse people. Let us use this time to recommit ourselves to a world that challenges traditionally rigid gender norms so that trans and gender diverse people can live authentically and with safety that everyone deserves. So the second council statement is in recognition and remembrance of the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women, which is held annually on December 6th, so tomorrow. During the 16 days of activism, Canadians reflect on the presence of gender-based violence in our own country. Tomorrow, on December 6th, many in our community and across Canada will pause to remember the 14 young women murdered at Polytechnique, Montreal, and all women who have suffered or who suffer gender-based violence. These days of remembrance and activism push us to consider the links between sexism, transphobia, and homophobia, and the greater risks faced by women, trans people, non-binary people, and gender-diverse people. The additional impact of racism and colonialism put Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirit people at even greater risk. Similarly, the impact of ableism on women with disabilities. As a city, we recognize the importance of taking action on the devastating impacts of gender-based violence. We are also mindful that challenging sexist and transphobic systems will not be limited to a few observations throughout the year, but an ongoing action. I will now ask Councillor Freeman if she would like to make a few personal remarks regarding the December 6th National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. Councillor?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Yes, as I've shared before, and I'd like to share again, December 6th is a really profound day for me. as a woman engineer. I was born in 1967, and I would just like to name the women who were gunned down and their ages and the academic pursuits that they were following. So Geneviève Bergeron, born 1968, civil engineering student. Helene Colgen, mechanical engineering student, born 66. Natalie Cruteau, born 1966, mechanical engineering student. Barbara Dane born 1967, mechanical engineering student. Anne-Marie Edward, born 1968, chemical engineering student. Maude Havernick, born 1960, materials engineering student. Maurice Nanier, born 1964, budget clerk in l'École Polytechnique's finance department. Maryse Leclerc, born in 1966, materials engineering student. Anne-Marie Lemay, born 67, mechanical engineering student. Sonia Pelletier, born 1961, mechanical engineering student. Michelle Richard, born 1968, materials engineering student. Annie Saint Arnaud, born 66, mechanical engineering student. Annie Turcotte, born 1969, materials engineering student. And Barbara Kluznik Wojnes, born 1958, a nursing student. So on December 6th, I was working on a construction site as a civil engineering student, same age as these women. And it was a very difficult day. I hadn't heard the news. The phone in the construction trailer where I was working rang incessantly all day long with people asking if I was okay, because there was worry more broadly for women engineering students across the country that there could be others who would feel similarly compelled as Mr. Lepine in his desire to remove women from non-traditional careers. And I think that one of the things about this day too is it profoundly affected women choosing to enter careers in mathematics, sciences, and engineering, because they felt that this could happen again. And so engineering had been on a steady increase with women entering the profession in undergraduates and was near 22%. And after this shooting, it dropped back to almost 10%. And so here we are all these many years later, and we're only at 20%. So the recovery of women choosing careers in engineering has been profoundly impacted in the events of this day. And that's just one of many professions where women strive to work in non-traditional careers. And this day, December 6th, is one of those days where we should pause and reflect about that struggle and how we can help to make a difference.
Thank you, Councillor. So thank you for those moments of reflection. They're important. They're both important days and important issues to keep in mind. And I think we're united in understanding that we need to work collectively to address these ongoing issues. So moving along in the agenda, disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Does anyone have a conflict of interest to declare? Seeing none, then we will invite the delegation from Tracy Van Kelsbeek, Executive Director of our Uptown Waterloo BIA, to present the board appointments for us. So welcome, Tracy.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to Council. As many of you know, and I know there are some new faces around the room with our councillors Roach, Wright, and Rowe. I think I got them all right. The BIA exists to promote and beautify Uptown Waterloo. And so our board is a local board of the municipality and represents our BIA membership and advocates on their behalf. Our board consists of 13 members, and one of whom shall be the Uptown Ward Councillor, which is Councillor Wright, and also an additional 2 non-voting members, which are myself and one of our city staff representatives, which right now is Kristen Sainsbury from the Economic Development Group. The rest of the remaining members consist of business and property owners and people who have been voted in by rate-paying members. So our board members are elected every 4 years in conjunction with municipal elections and are able to serve a maximum of 2 4-year terms before retirement. So with that, we do have a recommendation in front of you today to approve our 2023 to 2026 Board of Directors slate. So those folks are Nick Benger, who's from the Fat Sparrow Group, Vlad Blagovkanin, got to get that name. He is the new property manager over at Primus, which is the shops at Waterloo Town Square. Mandy Browse, who's operations manager and owner of Wordsworth Books. Melissa Durrell, owner of Durrell Communications. Cindy Fawcett from the Charcoal Group, she's their regional operations lead and manages the Bauer Kitchen. Kristen Hammond, who's been on our board in the past, and a CPA, most recently working over at Deloitte. Scott Higgins, who's president from HIP Developments. Alnor Keshvani, who's the owner of Loop Clothing. Rami Saeed, who's the owner of Patent Social. I shouldn't say Patent Social, it should say Revive. I just caught that. Goodness, sorry about that. Dana Short from Dana Short Gourmet and Gifts. George Santaris from Lexington Park Real Estate. Janet Weldon from Sun Life, she's a VP there. And Julie Wright, who is our Uptown City Councillor. And then the non-voting members being myself and Kristen Sainsbury. So those were the names that were voted in at our membership meeting on December the 16th by our members and are in front of you today for approval.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone. Thank you, Ed, to everyone who put their name forward to volunteer. It's an important roles that they play in our community, in addition to the work they do as an uptown business leader. So, council, does anyone have any questions about this? Okay, seeing none, then I will ask for a mover to a motion to approve the slate as it has been presented by Ms. Van Kelsbeek. Sorry. Councillor Freeman moving and Councillor Hamner seconding. All in favor? That's unanimous. So thank you very much. And again, thank you for the work that you do on behalf of the city and the uptown businesses, which make our community so vibrant. And just a quick shout out to people to remember when you're doing your upcoming holiday shopping. We have fantastic shops in uptown and across the city. Lots of unique gift ideas. So please patronize our local, your friends and neighbors and our local businesses. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor McCabe. And if I could just add one little piece here.
Certainly.
Ever since I've gone back to talk to people and ever since the BIA has been around, we've never been in a position where we were this past year with more people applying to be on our board than spots available. So it actually went to a vote this year. So that was, I feel it goes to show that, the voice of the BIA is being heard and people want to be a part of the good work that's being done in Uptown. So I just wanted to note that as well. Thank you so much.
Great. That's good news for sure. Thank you so much, Tracy. And thank you for the tree lighting on Friday night. That was an excellent event as well. So thank you for that. So the consent motion, does anyone have any items or questions that they wanted to pull out of the consent report? Anyone? Nope. Okay. So a mover for that, Councillor Bodley, and a seconder, Councillor Roach. All in favor? That is unanimous. So we're moving on to staff reports. So we have staff member Cassandra Pacey here to provide an overview and an update about the 2022 asset management update and report cards. So we will turn it over to you and welcome Ms. Pacey.
Mayor, members of council, corporate management, Glenn, and the public. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Cassandra Pacey, and I'm the manager of asset management. I'm here to share some successes and some information about the City of Waterloo's asset management practices. The items I will talk about today are our asset management story, the 2022 asset management report cards, expenditure needs and asset performance, the annual infrastructure funding gap, and what's next. While asset management has been occurring for decades, the formalization and documentation component is relatively new. In 2016, we took a big leap forward with Council's approval of the city's first comprehensive asset management plan, which used data from the award-winning Decision Support System, also known as the DSS. The DSS is a custom asset management system that offers the City of Waterloo the ability to use existing asset data, Council-approved funding, and deterioration information to project our performance of our assets over a 25-year timeframe. A couple of examples of our activities in the past 7 years include refreshing our asset data used within the DSS twice a year, which includes general updates, replacement costs, and adding in assets were previously excluded. We've updated our asset management approach from a like-for-like replacement approach to a modern equivalent in order to meet current design standards, follow council direction, influence climate adaptation and change, while reaching strategic or master plan goals. We have increased the number of assets such as roads, underground infrastructure, fleet, parking, and facilities that are being updated in the DSS via information from source systems, which means we are using existing processes and resources effectively and efficiently. We are also using the DSS to inform the cross-asset tool to assist rehabilitation and replacement decisions for assets within the municipal right-of-way. As part of the budget process, asset management uses the DSS to determine the percentage of needs by asset class. Financial planning uses those percentages to allocate the available rehabilitation and replacement funding. To assist effective decision-making, asset management provides a list of the assets identified by the DSS that need rehabilitation or replacement. Subject matter experts then professionally manage what assets are treated within the available funding allocated to them through the budget process. As asset needs exceed the available funding, professional management by subject matter experts is critical, as they understand the political and societal factors needed for effective decision-making. For example, taking into account an upcoming development project, or aligning work to avoid conflicts with regional construction projects. Asset management also uses the DSS to create the budget and target scenarios, which are then used to calculate the average annual funding gap and used within the report cards and asset management plan. Our second comprehensive asset management plan was developed using in-house expertise and received council approval in November of 2020. We plan to update the City of Waterloo's asset management plan every 4 years in order to align with the 3-year budget process and the long-term financial plan. We have also improved our data maturity assessment approach through collaborative discussions with SMEs, or subject matter experts. The city's asset management webpage is updated annually to share brief snapshots of asset management data, as well as meet the legislative requirements to post the asset management plan and policy on the city's website. With the assistance of the communications team and subject matter experts, the asset management team creates annual asset management report cards to keep both the council and public informed about the efforts to rehabilitate and maintain existing infrastructure. For the 2022 report cards, a couple of improvements have been made. We have a new funding visual, which is intended to be a quick visual that identifies the average annual funding gap, the average annual funding, and the average annual funding needed. We have also incorporated level of service metrics. In 2018, Ontario Regulation 588-17, asset management planning for municipal infrastructure was enacted and includes guidelines and expectations for the application of asset management principles for municipalities. One area of focus is level of service metrics. For core assets, which includes roads, bridges, water, sanitary, and storm, the province introduced specific levels of service metrics of interest, and they were included in the 2020 asset management plan. For non-core assets, so everything else that we own, municipalities have been delegated the responsibility for developing our own metrics. For this year's report cards, they have been revamped and now include a section on the level of service metrics, and this is the first time that non-core assets metrics are being reported on. Every report card includes a graph similar to the one on the screen before you. These graphs represent the asset class's budget scenario, which shares that projected asset performance based on deterioration rates, planned funding, and the current asset data included, and the funding included in the approved 2020 to 2022 capital budget and 2023 to 2029 capital forecast. Measuring performance is a complex activity with two main factors: condition and function. Condition is often the main factor used when considering how and when an asset should be treated. For example, replacing surface asphalt of a road while maintaining the base infrastructure to prevent premature reconstruction. Functional performance may also influence decisions about how and when an asset is renewed. One example is software application that may be outdated and therefore not meeting our needs, resulting in a decision to replace or upgrade it. The graph that you see on the screen before you illustrates the current projected tax-based assets performance over the next 25 years and currently identifies that just over 35% of tax-based funded assets currently exhibit a poor or very poor performance profile, and that over the next 25 years, this will increase to approximately 75% based on the current asset data, deterioration rates, and approved capital funding. Performance rating is different for every asset class. As an example, this is some information taken from Table 16 of the 2020 Asset Management Plan and gives a visual picture along with a description of what each asset performance category means for pavement, which includes for roads, parking lots, and laneways within parks and facility properties. For today's purposes, I pulled in the information from poor and very poor to help explain what these categories could mean in the report card performance graphs. The average annual funding gap has accumulated over many years and will similarly need to be improved over time. Rehabilitation and replacement funding for tax-based assets is primarily from the Capital Infrastructure Reinvestment Reserve Fund and the Canada Community Building Fund, formerly known as gas tax. Enterprise assets are funded from the appropriate rate reserves such as water, sanitary, storm, cemeteries, and fleet. Through the 2020 to 2022 budget process and long-term financial plan, Council approved a plan to begin closing the infrastructure funding gap. To continue with the plan approved as part of the 2020 long-term financial plan, through the 2023 budget process, Council will receive a request to increase infrastructure reinvestment funding for consideration on February 13th. While staff are proposing an increase to infrastructure reinvestment funding, grants from federal and provincial levels are also helpful, and staff continue to advocate for them. While the 2020 to 2022 capital budget and 2023 to 2029 capital forecast will invest more than $324 million for the treatment of city-owned assets over the 2020 to 2029 timeframe, the analysis performed through the Waterloo DSS has determined that this amount is insufficient to maintain existing levels of service. Analysis completed this year has determined that the annual infrastructure funding gap has increased by almost $14 million to $34 million, $28 million for tax-based funded assets, and $6 million for enterprise assets. And the change is being driven by a few key items: higher than anticipated inflation rates, which is impacting replacement costs, assets being added to the DSS, such as Molochs, dogways, containers, and traffic signs. General asset updates include levels of service and modern equivalent adjustments, and it also includes street tree planting updates, as well as some various other updates. So what's next? For several years, the city has built momentum in advancing municipal asset management principles and practices, and staff are continuing to look to build on those successes. We are required by OREG 588-17 to include organizations that we consolidate into our financial statements, and as a result, we will be looking to incorporate assets owned by the Waterloo Public Library and the BIA for inclusion in the DSS and for future reporting. Under OREG 588-17, municipalities are required to update their asset management plans at least every 5 years. However, as I noted earlier, we plan to update ours every 4 years. There are 4 improvement categories asset management will be focusing on for the foreseeable future: improving the efficiency of information flow from SME staff to asset management, minimizing the effort of staff through leveraging existing processes. Improving infrastructure performance and corresponding expenditure forecasts, continuing to work with SME staff to improve the data maturity of assets, working with SME staff to incorporate condition data where available to inform performance forecasting. All of these items will increase decision-making effectiveness with respect to selecting the most appropriate infrastructure improvements and their timing. They will also contribute to solving one of the most difficult challenges for organizations in general, which is minimizing the previously anticipated costs while achieving the same anticipated performance and meeting the public's expectations and expected levels of service. As I mentioned a few moments ago, the City of Waterloo took a big leap forward with respect to our asset management practices and principles in 2016, and we have continued to advance our efforts over the past 7 years. A big part of our success is the collaborative mindset and approach used throughout this organization. Without the subject matter experts, from operational staff through to council, the successes we see today would not have been possible. Asset management is a collaborative and iterative activity, and our collective success is a result of everyone's participation. All of the activities mentioned throughout this presentation have resulted in other municipalities calling to ask us for insight on our approach. How are we handling certain assets? Information on the DSS so they can assess the potential of the custom system for their municipality. This has given the city the opportunity to contribute to the asset management community, and I'm excited to share that City has won 3 awards. Without the support of everyone, it would have been extremely challenging to advance as far as we have, and for that, I want to express a big, big thank you to everyone that has worked with the asset management team over the past 7 years. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Cassandra. That was a very thorough report. So we will open it up to council if there are questions. Yeah, starting with Councillor Vasek.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor McCabe. Thanks, Cassandra. Just one of the questions, one of the things that was really striking to me in the public-facing report cards is the fleet and how it appears that it's going to go from a poor to good. It's going to improve in any case. I don't know if I have the rankings right. And the funding gap is relatively low, which is really different from most of the other report cards. So I was just, yes, my question is, can you share why this might be? And if we can expect to see that same trend as we do future asset management plan updates?
Through Mayor to the Councillor. So fleet's a unique asset class in that they have a relatively low number of assets. There's only about 360 assets for fleet. So proportionally, they're much smaller because some of the other asset classes, such as facilities, parks, and roads, they have thousands of assets. So it's subject to change, but the fleet data maturity has actually been deemed low, which means that we're expecting that as we get into more of the data and improving it, that we will see some changes. It could remain the same or it could result in a higher gap. But at this point, it's really under review, and as the data maturity improves, we'll see some improvements.
By improvements, you mean just more accurate data?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And can you speak to, or maybe Tracy can, a little bit about how electric vehicles might factor into that analysis? So
I'll start off and then I'll refer to Tracy if she's here. Electric vehicles are currently considered a modern equivalent change in approach, and the funding reserve for fleet doesn't have the capability to fund from a like for like to a modern equivalent because of the way that we fund that particular reserve. I know that there are discussions going on about EV vehicles, but I think at this point it's probably best if Tracy comes up and answers.
Sorry, when you're speaking, could you just get a little closer to the mic? Did you need her to repeat anything? No. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasek. Yes, as Cassandra indicated, we're working on our data integrity for our fleet, looking at conditions and utilization. But our funding model right now is based on replacing like for like and looking at the costs of electric vehicles where they're available. They're much higher. So we don't have funds in our reserve for those. We're looking at other options through perhaps some green reserve funds to get additional monies. So where plausible now, we're looking at purchasing electric vehicles or even looking at alternative fuel vehicles. And we're balancing that with having the infrastructure to actually charge the vehicles when we buy them. So it's the two-prong approach to looking at them, but it's definitely high on our radar. It's a climate commitment, so we're looking at that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think so. It generally sounds like we don't know if there's going to be any change to the funding gap, but there could be. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions from members of council? Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McCabe. I appreciate you putting that information in your slide deck there about sort of the reasons why the infrastructure gap is increasing, because I know I had inquired about that earlier. So I kind of just want to flip this a bit on its head. So out of the main reasons why we're seeing this $13.6 million increase in the funding gap, 60% of that is related to inflation, and understanding that that's not sort of a perfect, it's just an estimate. But to flip that question on its head, if we were in a normal or a typical inflationary time today, is it fair to say that this gap would be about 60% less than what we're seeing today in terms of the increase that we would be seeing?
Through you, Mayor, to the councillor, I don't think that we would see a 60% drop because there always is some level of inflation, but it definitely wouldn't be anywhere near the 60% if we were in a normal particular year.
Perfect. Thank you.
Other questions from council? No? Just a question for me. I was wondering when you were with the cost estimates in a couple of different places, it indicated that you hadn't factored in the cost of like for climate change or like some of those additional. I'm just wondering if you have a sort of sense of what, because a sense of what those additional costs may be when we look at I don't know if that's too complicated, like you have to break it down into different asset classes, or if you have a sense of what that budget would be.
To answer your question, I don't really have a sense of that right now. We're really waiting for the climate change plan to provide some additional direction. We consider it, but without some specific direction on what changes we might want to make, it's hard to forecast out where we're going to be. So really looking for that climate change plan to provide that strategic direction to be built into the asset management system and plan going forward.
Okay. That answers my second question about why wasn't it built into it. So thank you for that. Seeing no other questions right now. Okay, thank you very much. Again, Cassandra, just looking for the recommendation there is to receive this report as information. Can I have a mover? Councillor Rowe, and a seconder, Councillor Vasic. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the information that you provided. Okay, moving along. The next staff report, we'll welcome Lisa Dunlop, and sorry, I don't know the other person standing there.
And Kathy Weedhouse, Director of HR.
Oh, okay, sorry, I haven't met you yet. So welcome to you both to walk us through the Respectful Workplace Policy and Program. So over to you both.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mayor McCabe and councillors. My name is Lisa Dunlop, and I'm the Health, Safety and Wellness Manager at the city, which is part of the Human Resources Division. And today I'm attending council to request approval on the city's updated Respectful Workplace Policy and Program, but just wanted to provide a brief introduction to administrative policy review at the city. Throughout your council term, there will be different divisions that bring forward policies bring forward corporate policies for your approval, as all city policies do require council approval. And the human resources policies specifically brought forward by our division include policies that are directly related to employees, but they also have references to council as well in some of them, but not all. The Respectful Workplace Policy and Program is a human resources policy, and that was implemented to outline expectations of respectful behavior to staff, but also to achieve compliance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act that requires the implementation of a harassment policy, which is reviewed annually. So this policy comes through annually at council. The city's policy exceeds legislation by prohibiting workplace disrespect. So the Occupational Health and Safety Act requires the prohibition of harassment, including discrimination, but we extend beyond the legislation with the inclusion of prohibiting workplace disrespect. And prior to presenting this policy to you at council, we requested feedback from the Human Resources Division, city leadership, unions and associations, and the Joint Health and Safety Committees to see any feedback they have on updating the policy, and then we reviewed it accordingly. So since this policy went through a very thorough review in 2021, this year's review only resulted in very minor editorial changes and just kind of things that we've learned over the past year. And that's pretty much it for the policy review. So I appreciate your time and happy to take any questions on the policy.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you.
So turning it over to council, are there questions anyone has here? Seeing none. Sorry, was that? Oh, sorry. Okay, we're moving right along here. So Councillor Freeman is moving the recommendation. So do I have a seconder? Councillor Hamner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you so much to you
Thank you
both.
very
I
much.
appreciate it. Okay. So moving on to the next report, the early approval of capital projects. This is basically routine business and some early tenders. These are going to be part of the budget, but it's early tender. It's put out early so that we can get tenders out. So I don't believe there's a presentation for it. It's just see if staff have any questions on this. Oh, you're just moving it? Okay, it's hard to see over the poinsettias sometimes. So, sorry, Councillor Freeman is moving the recommendation that that council receive this report. And Councillor, Hamner said she would second it. All in favor? All right, thank you so much. Where are we now? Okay, so the next one then is we have Ainsley Rigo to talk to us about the new adult school crossing guard at Laurelwood Drive and American Beach Avenue. So, oh, sorry, there's no presentation. Sorry, no presentation. Just one, does council have any questions about this? So we'll start with the ward councillor, from Ward 2, Councillor Bodley.
No questions. Just wanted to move it, but also wanted to thank staff for putting this forward. It's a very, as the report indicates, it's a very well used intersection that is difficult for children to cross as they're heading not only to Laurel Heights but also to Abraham Urb. So thank you for your work on this, and looking forward to having the crossing guard in there. And with that, I'll move it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Freeman, do you have a question or you're a second? Okay, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, my question is really more broadly a question for the budget, I guess. One of the things that we've talked about on many of an occasion is the challenges associated with finding individuals that are willing to serve in this position. It's a huge commitment. It's every school day for the entire school calendar, and it's a coming and going, so you can't really leave town or anything. And the wage for this is extraordinarily low, like $8,000 for all of that work. It's not okay. I really would like us to look at this number in our budget and look at ways to improve this.
Thank you, Councillor. I guess we won't have you write the job description for it. On the upside, you do get to protect children. So that's, I guess, the upside. But I don't know if Filippo, did you? Oh, I thought you, yeah, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Freeman, we'll definitely make note of that and take that into consideration in our budget deliberations that are obviously coming up very soon. So appreciate you noting that and working with Jenny and her team as well to take note of that and see what can be done if that would be helpful in the recruitment and retention of this important role. Thank you.
Thanks, Philippa. Okay, so was there any other questions or comments that people had to? Just a quick comment from me. It's just, I mean, if we all would be more mindful of our driving habits and speed at which we move these vehicles that are, putting some of these really young lives and individuals at risk would be really important. That's my sort of editorial comment to it, because it's clear that the need is there, and particularly young children. It's, we want to make sure that they're getting to and from school safely, and the guardians who are with them. So thank you, staff, for making this recommendation. So it's moved by Councillor Bodley and seconded by Councillor Freeman. All in favor? That's unanimous. So thank you very much. Okay, so the next on the agenda are the 2022 council appointments to committees and boards. This report was in the revised packages, so just a quick preamble. Just thank you to council for thinking through where you wanted to serve in addition to your role as ward councillors, where you wanted to serve provide your additional leadership for these committees. So do we just start by reading out the committee and you'll, okay. Okay, so, community service, so these are the department liaisons. So with the community services role, we had counselor, you know what? I apologize, I don't have my, just give me a second while I pull my list up here. I closed it. Let me just open it here. Okay, so Counselor Hamner and Counselor Roach. Do I pose this as a question? Are you willing to serve as the department liaisons for the community services? I'm just not sure how we. Okay. Okay. Yes. All right. Thank you. For the corporate services division, except for finance, Counselor Vasic. Yep. Okay. Or do you want me to just read them all off?
No, this works. This is good for, it gives Brooke a chance to.
Okay. Okay.
Have the audio as well.
Okay, so in the finance liaison, we have Counselor Freeman. The CAO office divisions, Counselor Rowe. And the IPPW, Integrated Planning and Public Works, we have Councillors Bodley and Counselor Wright. So thank you very much for each of you for that. Are you keeping up? Rook, I'm not sure. Okay, there we go. So then moving on to the City of Waterloo committees and boards. So the Advisory Committee on Culture, Councillor Wright. Because of her service as the finance chair or finance liaison, Councillor Freeman will be on the Audit Committee. The Community Cash Grants Advisory Committee, we have Councillor Hamner. The Dog Designation Appeal Committee, Councillor Hamner and Councillor Rowe. Councillor Vasic looks very excited about that. Sorry, where was I? Municipal Heritage Committee, Councillor Rowe. Signed Variance Committee, Councillor Vasic and Councillor Roach. The Sustainability Advisory Committee, Councillor Bodley. The Waterloo Advisory Committee on Active Transportation, Councillor Bodley. Waterloo Economic Development Advisory Committee, that's myself and Councillor Hammer. Waterloo Park Advisory Committee, Councillor Bodley. Waterloo Public Library Board, Councillor Wright. Just let Rook catch up, okay. You're a fast typer, Rook. Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery Board of Directors, Councillor Rowe. Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee, Councillor Hanmer. Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery, Councillor Roach. Kitchener-Waterloo Oktoberfest Advisory Committee, Councillor Roach. Age-Friendly Multi-Agency Committee, Councillor Vasic. Town and Gown Committee, Councillor Rowe. University Board of Directors, that's me. Uptown BIA is already discussed as Councillor Wright. Waterloo Community Art Center Board of Management, Councillor Vasic. Wilfrid Laurier Board of Governors, Councillor Bodley. And the Voldemar Neufeld Collection Board of Management, Councillor Roach. And then Innova Energy Corporation is myself and Councillor Freeman as finance liaison. And then the Innova Power Corps Board of Directors is myself. So that is the slate for the 20. These are 2-year terms as well. So these are the committee appointments, and I'm looking for a recommendation that we approve these and that we enact the appropriate bylaws to appoint ourselves to these boards and committees. So unless there's any questions, no, seeing no questions, can I have a mover? Someone to move them? Councillor Roach? Okay. We'll give Councillor Roach that one. And a seconder, Councillor Hamner. Okay, so all in favor? That's unanimous. Great, thank you so much. Look forward to working with everyone on those various committees and boards. So there's no notice of motions from previous meetings. No communications or correspondence. Unfinished business. So we'll move to questions. Are there any questions from council? Yes, Councillor Bodley.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor McCabe. I have a question about everyone's favorite topic right now, which is Bill 23. My question is going to be about the financial concerns related to development charge, lost revenue, basically. And I am going to ask about that in a moment, but I want to take a second to acknowledge that although there's been a lot of public discourse and commentary around the financial piece, I really don't want to lose sight about the other extraordinarily damaging potential impacts of Bill 23, including Conservation Authorities Act changes that could cause problems related to wetland protection and flooding, regional planning concerns that are going to potentially impact our ability to have groundwater protection in our region, transit-oriented development, things like the countryside line, land use planning concerns around environmental protection of previously designated lands, not just greenbelt lands, but in the region of Waterloo, environmentally sensitive land designated lands, ESPA lands, other important farmland, not even to get into the heritage, appeal rights, inclusionary zoning concerns, et cetera, et cetera. There are significant challenges from my perspective with Bill 23. But I do want to talk about the finance piece. And I'm curious, as part of the next budget process, which Ms. Reynolds referenced as coming soon, are staff going to provide council with visibility to some of these direct cost impacts? And I say direct because I also note that, given some of the things that I referenced earlier, that there are going to be significant indirect cost impacts related to staffing concerns about getting the expertise that we need that used to reside either at the region or with conservation authorities. So yeah, are we going to have visibility to these direct cost impacts? And then a follow-up with that is, are we going to have options as council for consideration in terms of how the city is going to manage that significant funding gap to ensure that vital growth-related infrastructure projects can still continue in spite of our revenue collecting abilities being limited?
Thank you, Councillor. Do you want me to look to you, Tim, for your first initial response?
Yes, thanks, Mayor McCabe, and to Councillor Bodley. Maybe I'll kick it off here and then I'll turn it to Philippa. But certainly Councillor Bodley's comments resonate a lot with the administration. Bill 23 is really, really impactful to municipalities across Ontario, including the City of Waterloo. We've been talking administratively, as Council knows, about our concerns, and in fact we did submit a detailed submission, thanks to Mr. Cotter and the team in IPPW and Finance for collaborating. We did submit our comments into the ERO registry, the provincial intake, by the deadline of November 24th. And that expressed many of the areas that Councillor Bodley you're speaking to beyond the development charge gap. There is significant changes that come to the planning process and the overall planning regime, both here at the city and at the region. And we've, I think, expressed those very, very clearly. We are noting, of course, that the legislation was approved last week, and we are now quickly kind of turning our minds to what does adaptation look like for this city? How would we operate within this environment as we go forward? And I am going to commit a little bit here, and maybe I'll get in trouble from my colleagues after, but we hope to be before council next week with a little bit of a detailed roadmap around adaptation and where we would go. And it's going to cover off the financial pieces, but also those other important elements that Councillor Bodley you've raised here. So that's a little bit of an intro, and we'll talk more for sure next week. And as I say, that'll be a little bit of a late starter for council because it's a work in progress in real time right now. But I'll turn it to Philippa maybe to respond to the financial questions specifically. Philippa?
Thanks, Tim. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Bodley. As Tim indicated, but we'll give a little teaser here. As part of our submission to the province, we did indicate an order of magnitude with regard to the financial impact on the development charges side of things, which We're ranging in the ballpark of $23 million to $31 million over the first 5 years, and that's a reduction of about 30 to 40% in revenues. But as you noted, Councillor Bodley, that does not take into account any kind of operating impacts that we may have. That's really the one-time capital dollars to build infrastructure and the supporting infrastructure. In addition, those estimates don't include attainable housing impacts, because that is, again, further to regulations which haven't come out yet. And land as well. That piece as well is not clear yet in the legislation, and so there's some more number crunching that we really need to do once we know more in the coming weeks and months. But given the flux of Bill 23 that we have been experiencing over the past month and a half or so leading into our budget process, we have paused our work on the new DC background study and bylaw, which we had initiated early in 2022 and have been working on throughout the year. And that is allowing us to rely on our current study and bylaw that are in place, that has been in place since 2020 and that expires at the end of 2024. And what that means is that there are pieces of the legislation that will not apply to us immediately. Those pieces will come into force for us specifically a year or two from now, depending on when we want to look at our next bylaw and study. And so, for example, the 5-year phase-in will not be implemented right away because we have an existing bylaw in place. So for those municipalities with bylaws prior to January 1st, 2022, the phase-in itself will be delayed. And so until the next bylaw. And so that was a mitigation that we have elected to lean back on our existing bylaw to ensure that we really understand what's happening with this legislation. But surely some of the effects are going to be felt right away, such as affordable housing exemptions, rental reductions, and so on. So there are impacts that are coming immediately. Some will be 1 to 2 years away, but certainly very, very close to where we are right now in future budget process. So certainly for the 3-year budget for the City of Waterloo, this is going to be an area of, I would say, keen interest for all of us into how to grapple with what that looks like in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Philippa. Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor? No? Councillor Freeman?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Philippa. I think what I'm really worried about is timing. The legislature is going on break in 4 days. And I'm really worried about getting this messaging in to the government. And I didn't know if there's anything short and sweet that we can get to some of our opposition members before the break, whether and I'm just worried about this because there's so much at stake. And the city of Mississauga, for example, they've identified that within the city of Mississauga, they're going to be looking at an 8% tax increase to bridge the gap and they have a huge assessment base already and some of the highest taxes, I think, in the province. So I don't know what this looks like. And the other piece that I'm really worried about is that there is this notion that our reserve funds are just sitting there, that we're sitting on money, that we're earning interest on it, and how they tie into our 10-year capital plan and how they're effectively all allocated. And if memory serves me correct, and I don't know whether Cassandra's still here. Oh, yeah, sorry. If memory serves me correct, under some of the enterprise fees, so stormwater and other water management fees, we're actually going to go below our desired reserve line in the near term. So I'm just really worried about this. It took us the better part of 20 years to rebuild those reserves after I came into office in 06, and it just, the notion that they're money that aren't allocated is so upsetting. And so I'm just trying to figure out how do we get the information to this particular government before they take a break?
So I'll just add a couple of points that that this has been a very active discussion by a number of municipalities, and including, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. From the MOU table, they've been in discussions, from day one and prior to that. Certainly the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus, which met, Tim and I were there on Friday, and we met in November as well in an emergency meeting to talk about this. So the chair, who is the chair of the Ontario Big City Mayors, who is the mayor of Guelph, Cam Guthrie's, he actually made a presentation to the standing committee. One of the few that was able to make a presentation to the standing committee about this bill, and provided some excellent comments that were, collective comments from Ontario's biggest 29 municipalities that make up the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus. So certainly people in the municipal sector, leaders in the municipal sector, as well as individual municipalities, have been having those conversations directly with Minister Clark and others at the provincial government. Certainly, we do need to work with, and I think have worked with, our local MPP as well. But we are doing what we can to get that message through, absolutely. Philippa, sorry, I don't know if you went on a bit of a commentary there, but if you had anything you wanted to add to.
No, that's helpful, indeed. And I don't know, Tim, did you want to go? I think you were.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, all really good points and good information the mayor provided there. We can also take away, Councillor Freeman, the notion of what other communication steps we could take, perhaps coming out of the council meeting next week. So let us work on that, including the update to the local MPPs. I would add, in relation to your comment on the reserve, development charge reserve funds, that is a bit of a misnomer definitely out there from the province right now. Next week, Philippa's team is also bringing forward our reserve and reserve fund forecast. So council will see it really, really clearly where our reserves are going from a development charge perspective. And that notion of borrowing is in our cards. It's not directly in response to Bill 23. That was our plan all along. And so, I think that'll be quite informative for council, and I think will help in our response on Bill 23 specifically. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Freeman, for those comments. Is any other comments or questions or anything from staff on this? Or sorry, council? And I would just echo both Councillor Bodley and Freeman's comments, and the timelines that the province have presented a series of legislation in are very, very troubling and very challenging. And we know that between Bill 109, Bill 23, Bill 39, it's really impacting the analysis that you're able to do and the work that you're able to do as well. So we appreciate you working hard to bring that report back on December 12th so that we can, to Councillor Freeman's point, so that we can communicate what the challenge this presents to us more directly to our MPPs and to the provincial government and to the public at large. So thank you, staff, for that. I think it's important in terms of the DCs that the province is suggesting are sitting in reserves, that if those DCs or development charges are no longer paid by the development community, we're talking about potentially losing things like parkland, recreation facilities, other amenities and programs. That's what those development charges build for our community. So important things to keep in mind. So moving to new business. Is there anything anyone has under new business? I'll just add a couple quick things. Again, I think maybe I think, is this Philippa? Is this your first time with us now as officially as the commissioner? I should have maybe recognized that at the start. So welcome and thank you very much. Don't mean to put you on the spot, but I guess it.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
And just again, as I mentioned earlier, the BIA had their tree lighting on Friday, and I was really pleased to be joined by Councillors Wright, Bodley, and Councillor Rowe, and of course the man in red, Santa, was there as well, and probably 250 to 300 residents. So it was really a great event. Thank you. Wonders of Winter are the park is lit, so if you have time, please go and take a look. There's a free skating party coming up, I think December 18th by KW Lions, and of course the menorah will be lit in Waterloo Park. Sorry, at Town Square on December 18th at, I believe it's 5:45 in the evening. So just a few things to keep in mind in addition to working in your holiday shopping at our local businesses across Waterloo. Yes, Councillor Vasic.
I do have new business. Sorry, it's related to theater. So Empty Space had their last production ever of The Last 15 Seconds last week, a very emotional performance. Because it was the last of, they were really celebrating the life of their former director, Majdi, who died by suicide in the middle of the year. And so I just wanted to let people know, if you're among your networks and people who care very much about it, they announced they're doing a fund for hopefully one racialized new Canadian youth. I don't know if it's a youth, actually. I'd have to clarify it. Anyways, one new Canadian racialized younger person to mentor annually, and they're raising money for that. So they raised $15,000 by last week, and I'm not sure the deadline, so worth looking into the deadline. But they're aiming to get $50,000. So do spread it among your networks. It was a really stunning performance. And then I went to a Greenlight Arts production a few weeks ago. I went to the Addams Family musical on the weekend. So I've been all over theater. And I always kind of think, oh, it's local. Even though I know local theater is very good, I always think, oh, we're going to local theater. And I think, oh, this will be nice. But it's always remarkable and really world class. And so just an encouragement to get out to the in-person productions again, if you can, because arts and culture is really struggling right now with getting their memberships back. So.
Very good point. Thank you, Councillor. And yeah, if you're looking to get experiences for people as holiday gifts, there's lots of opportunity. We have a fantastic and vibrant arts and cultural community. Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay. So we will, I need a mover and a seconder for the enactment of the bylaws. Anyone? Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Wright. I wasn't sure if that was just a stretch or. All in favor? That's unanimous. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Bodley. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.